Carry on.
Yes, sir. Respected senior doctors, colleagues and friends, and I am a doctor of Tiruvallur and other states, and mostly some doctors are joined from abroad also. You are all welcome you on the part of I am Tiruvallur. Welcome to our CME today regarding COVID by Professor Sharma Doctor. We start with I am a prayer now. Sir. May everybody be happy. May every one of us see to it that nobody suffers from any pain or sorrow. I don't ask for crown, nor I wish to be in heaven or reborn. I only want to alleviate the suffering of those people who are burning in fire of sorrow. Christian's prayer. Dear Lord, thou great physician, I kneel before thee, since every good and perfect gift must come from thee. I pray, give skill to my hand, clear vision to my mind, kindness and sympathy to my heart. Give me singleness of purpose, strength to lift at least a part of the burden of my suffering fellow men, and a true realization of the rare privilege that is mine. Take from my heart all guilt and worldliness. Take that with the simple faith of a child, I may rely on thee. Thank you.
புதிய இந்திய மருத்துவ சங்கம் வேண்டுதல். எல்லோரும் மகிழ்வுடன் வாழ, எல்லோரும் நலமுடன் வாழ, வலி எனும் தொல்லை நீங்கி, அல்லல் செய்யும் மின்னல் நீங்க, பேராசை பிரதிபயன் அகற்றி பிணி போக்கும் பெரும் பணியாற்றுவோம். வணக்கம்.
Yes, sir. Next, welcome address by our President, Dr. Gopalakrishnan, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, over to you, sir.
Good morning to all of you. So, welcome to our CME program. We are conducting this program from on behalf of IMA Tiruvallur, and the speaker is an eminent physician and an eminent well-known figure nationally and internationally. He is the past practitioner in our place at Tiruvallur for long duration, and now at present settled at Bangalore with his family. Now he is doing academic activities there itself, and he is a good practitioner and a physician and an academician, rather than a good orator, and he is having all faith regarding the philosophical teacher also. So we had discovered a good. This is the good opportunity to have some good news and good messages, correct messages from Dr. Sharma. Once again, and welcoming all of you for the CME. Thank you. Jagadish? Jagadish?
Hello?
Jagda?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Carry on.
Hello?
Jagadish?
If you can hear me, I'll go with the speaker's introduction.
Yes, sir. Sir.
So, good morning to all my colleagues. May God bless us during this testing time of COVID. I have been associated with Dr. Sharma ji for the past 30 years. He is my friend, philosopher, and guide in medicine and religious knowledge. He can talk on any subject of medicine. He has got a whole lot of medical teaching materials with him. He can write a medical textbook on his own. I think he will do it. He prepares his own PowerPoint slides. He will not stick to the stage while taking classes. Many a time if the laptop goes disconnected, the projector does not work, the speaker will be helpless, but not with our Sharma ji. Give him a marker and a pen and a whiteboard, he is ready. His spiritual knowledge and Bhagavad Gita and Shankaracharya, Viveka Chudamani and all those things are to be heard for better appreciation. He is taking classes for MRCP students. So he is basically an internal medicine with a special interest to cardiometabolic and chest diseases, infectious diseases, and postgraduate medical training. His credentials are FRCP Edinburgh, FRCP Glasgow, FSCP, FCCP USA, and life member of professional bodies like IMA, API, Diabetic Association, Thyroid Society, etc. He is an online faculty for MRCP students, Taxila American University. Faculty JSS Medical College University, Mysore. Great Eastern Medical School, Srikakulam. Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Srikakulam. Tamil Nadu is adjunct professor, Tamil Nadu Medical University, MGR Medical University. National Professor of Family Medicine, IMA CGP. Over 300 CME talks he has presented are available at the www.drsharma.in and YouTube. Dr. Sharma's CME club has over than 200 doctors, monthly CME doctors for Chennai is going on. He is also a member of the fellow of like-minded group FOSWL, dealing with all sorts of subjects in city. It is going on in the Sundar Medical Foundation auditorium. You can also join with that. With this small introduction, it will go on for 1.5 hours if I go on introducing it him. So with this small introduction, I invite the speaker to take on the stage, please. Thank you.
Shall I start, sir?
Yeah, yes, sir.
A very hearty welcome and pronouns to all the persons who have come here. All of us are my friends, and I have been with them and helped by them throughout. My obeisance to all of you, and also to the gurus who made us what we are today. We start with the one particular word which tells everything about life. Idam na mama. What is that? Idam, this one, na mama. Even this is not mine. Every moment, every presentation, every interaction, every endeavor in our life is propelled by the Almighty. Whoever may be the Almighty, irrespective of the religion, there is one force, one particular power which is helping us to do whatever we are trying to do. So with that prayer to the Almighty, which is already submitted by both of you, I start the presentation with a humble note that here people like Jayaraman Doctor and other LVK Murthy sir, other well-versed physicians, whom I cannot name all of them here, have tremendous knowledge about medicine in general, and the knowledge about COVID in particular is highly commendable by every one of you. What I'm going to do now is to just, as a bala or as a sort of beginner, I try to voice out whatever little I could read through and understand. And I understand that whatever I said is having a lot of limitation in terms of its universality, in terms of its concurrence with the time, and in terms of its changing environment of COVID. As we all know, COVID knowledge has been increasing by leaps and bounds for the last 6 months because everyone wants to tell us what is going on. It is important to be communicated, but there is a problem. In this communication, methods, non-formal methods like WhatsApp and other media will send messages which may be quite contrary, contradictory, detrimental, and sometimes false also. So what we have to do as clinicians, we have to go and search the information in the relevant websites, international websites, and find out whether what we have received or seen is really the truth. Then only we will be able to verify the veracity of the information. Barring that, there is no way we can be scientifically true to our patients. Days have changed from disease orientation to patient orientation to person orientation. Each individual's response to COVID, or for that matter, any other bug, is going to be highly different. So the experiences of people who are treating is highly valuable apart from the literature that we have got in our store. So here I invite your attention to 4 or 5 international websites, the Ministry of Health website, the ICMR website, the IDSA, International Diseases, International Society for Communicable Diseases, and also the CDC, that is the Communicable Diseases Center, Atlanta, and of course the WHO, apart from various other publications which we are seeing. So this lecture is planned in such a way that it will go into the hearts of the young doctors and also the practicing physicians, not aimed at tertiary care physicians. So the knowledge that we need to have in tertiary care setup when we try to treat patients in a hospital setup is absolutely different. And probably with the help of you and my friend agreement that we may require to have a part 2 of this presentation where we are going to deal with more extensively all those things which ought to be done in hospital. So whereas now what we are going to do is we try to concretize our knowledge, crystallize the evidence, and see in the next 1 hour or so what we are able to really digest from the various publications. Here, I would just invite your attention that more than 1,000 pages of information from various international sources has been looked into, and what we are going to do is only a summary of that, and nothing is mine. Idam na mama. Any mistakes, misunderstandings, misinterpretations are absolutely mine. Please start looking at the presentation. Now I am going to share the screen. Just pause for a while. If you say that you are able to see my screen, then I will go ahead. Can you see the screen, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go to the first slide. Needless to focus on this slide. This is only a summary of what exactly has been told by our friend just now. I have been associated very sort of God's willing that I have been able to do teaching activities in several institutions. Barring that, there is nothing much that you do not know about me. Now, I request all of you to switch off your video as well as the audios so that it will be very easy for us to concentrate on what we are doing. Dr. Gopalakrishna ji, please.
Yes, sir.
Video. Now, this is a comprehensive update up to today morning or yesterday night, whatever it is. And you can look up for different things as drsharma.in. So we are not going to raise any questions now. Please keep your questions at the end and then don't raise hands in between. At the end of the presentation, you will have a chance to ask your questions in the chat box. We will be able to sort of answer. So barring that, it will be a sort of one-way presentation from the speaker. So we have this okay. Two important words, very interchangeably, very confusingly, that are being used are the quarantine and isolation. I hope all of you understand the difference between the two. So before that, there are two names that you see here, SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. What is the difference between the two? SARS-CoV-2 is the virus name, just like HIV. And COVID-19 is the name of the disease, just like AIDS. You have the spirochete, the Treponema pallidum is the organism, and syphilis is the disease. You have Spirella minus is the organism, rat bite fever is the disease. Likewise, SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus given by the International Committee on Taxonomy for Viruses, ICTV. And COVID-19 is the name of the disease that is caused by this virus. So the two terms are very self-explanatory. Quarantine means to take away those who have been exposed to a communicable disease but not yet symptomatic or tested positive. Either they are non-symptomatic or non-positives, or such persons, if they have been removed for purpose of observation because they have been exposed, that is called quarantine. Then what is isolation? It is separation of a person or a group of people known or reasonably believed to be infected with the communicable disease. How do we know that? They have a clinically manifest disease or they have a test positivity. Such individuals pose a great risk for transmission and potentially they are infectious, and those have to be separated from the others, and that is what is called isolation. Now, several things like mortality rate, case fatality rate, hospital fatality rate, these are all familiar to us, and this presentation is going to be shared with all of you. I'm not going to dwell on the different definitions of them, but one thing that has come out very strikingly in this epidemic is called infection fatality rate. which we have not heard earlier. What is this infection fatality rate? This infection fatality rate means the number of deaths due to COVID divided by the number of people who are infected with the COVID. This is what exactly we are getting from various international and national sources. Let us say we have so many cases of COVID reported in India and so many people died. The rate that you apply for that is what is called the infection fatality rate. Again, I'm not focusing on the other things. Primarily, the secondary attack rate is important. Number of persons who get the disease from the index case. That is the one which drives the epidemic. Let us see a little further. This you need to know what is called the R0. What is R0? It is a measure of the rapidity of the spread of the disease. How do I know that? 1,000 people are there with COVID whose R0 is, let us say, estimated to be 2.5. These 1,000 would give infection and infect another 2,500 because R0 is 2.5. 2.5 multiplied by 1,000 is 2,500. Then at the second generation level, this 2,500 people will infect multiplied by 2.5 is 6,250 and so on, an exponential growth of the disease when there are no control measures. So if we know the R0, we can predict how fast the disease is spreading. COVID at the moment has been worked out to have a R0 of 2 to 2.85 in different geographical regions. So what is the usefulness of this? If the R0, let us say, becomes 1 or less than 1, then the epidemic is going to end. Because if 1,000 people are going to give to 900, 900 are going to give to 800, 800 are going to give to only 90% of them, like that it dwindles and the epidemic falls. So when do we get the R0 to below 1? That is a big surprise. All of us have to wait and see. And all these control measures is to bring the R0 from around 2.85 upper limit to around 1 in the near future. How to achieve that? By all the control measures which we are adopting. Now here, there are international sites linked here, and you can, from the presentation, you can click to ICMR site, Ministry of Family Welfare, and then Center for Diseases Control, Atlanta, COVID-19 international site, Worldometers, NDTV update, and eMedicine. So these are only few sites which we could list here, but nonetheless, there are very many. I always urge you to check any information that you look in WhatsApp or any other message, whether it is correct or not, or update or not, looking at these international guidelines. Now, you can see here, there are 3 types of peaks. This is peak number 1, and then the peak number 2, and this is the third one. Which one would you like? Obviously the third one, because there the peak occurs early, somewhere around Jan 220 or something like that to July, and then it dwindles. That is called the slow burn. We all expect that we will be in the mode of slow burn. The other one is fall peak. That is, it rises very fast, and again there will be a second peak here and goes down. The third one, which is more sort of protracted, peaks and valleys, and that is the one, the interval and height of the coming waves will depend upon multiple factors, including the control measures that we take. So what all we are trying to say is, we would like to convert the epidemic into a slow burn type, or at the most we would settle for peak and valleys type. Why? Because we would like to restrict the onslaught. Now, regarding transmission, all of you are aware of the transmission. There is what is called the droplet transmission and aerosol transmission. What is droplet? 5 microns or more and less than 5 microns. The particle size is less than 6 feet. So that is, particle size is bigger, and then the distance it can travel is smaller. This is the way that every one of us is believing that COVID is transmitted by droplet, and of course by the fomites also here. These are the 2 ways it could transmit. What about the aerosol? Lot of gossip and lot of literature also is there on aerosol. What it could be? Could it be an aerosol? What does it mean? If the particle diameter is less than 5 micrometers, means it is a very smaller particle. It can travel larger distances of more than 6 feet, which means that we will be able to get the disease even if we have not come in contact with a COVID positive patient through the air. Is that possible now? The answer is an emphatic no. I'm telling an emphatic no till yesterday. Lots of work has been published on this, and several experts have written to WHO to look into the all the documents and say that there is aerosol. Yes, there is aerosol in special situations where there is bronchial lavage is done or bronchoscope is done, or where aerosol generating procedures are done. Not in the community, thankfully. But having said, in COVID, anything can change. Tomorrow there could be an evidence saying that it is an aerosol. But at the moment, don't believe if somebody says it is an aerosol in general. It is not an aerosol, it is as a droplet only. I'm going to share you the latest publication of WHO, which has looked into 30 studies on aerosol versus droplet. That will be in your mailboxes or in your WhatsApp very, very soon after the meeting. Now, all of you know the transmission, the key is coughing, sneezing, and talking. This part all of you are aware very much. The viral shedding from the upper respiratory tract. The people sometimes said this is not a respiratory disease, this is a multi-system disease. Yes, everything is starting as a respiratory disease can become a multi-system disease. Even many viral infections can become multi-system diseases. To start with, this is the respiratory tract disease. The upper respiratory tract is the one which is mainly colonized by this and then invaded. There is no conclusive evidence of vertical transmission, means mother to child transmission. What about breast milk? It is not secreted in the breast milk. On the other hand, mothers who are COVID positive are encouraged to breastfeed by WHO and international agencies. So, prospective studies of lab confirmed cases and close contact have revealed that the incubation period or the period of contamination is around 5 days of symptoms of onset. Just before 5 days from the symptoms of onset, people may be excreting the virus, and they do not know that they are going to become patients. Peak infectiousness is during the pre-symptomatic and early symptomatic. You may confuse with the two words pre-symptomatic and early symptomatic. Pre-symptomatic is someone who does not have symptoms, and tomorrow after 3 days he becomes test positive. So that is a pre-symptomatic. Asymptomatic means a person will be positive, but he will not have symptoms. That is called an asymptomatic person. Early infection, you understand. Now, how about the healthcare workers? In the conventional settings, in the contingency settings, all these are tagged to annotations which are listed down here, international websites, and then one can go into those details and see more about those things. So conventionally, surgical mask or N95 should be able to protect, and when we are doing aerosol generating procedures, N95 or N99 or PAPR are essential. So ideally, healthcare workers are at the greatest risk, and donning and doffing of the PPE equipment, all that is essential. Now, what are the non-pharmacological preventive interventions? The main thing is social distancing. Earlier we said 3 feet, now we say 6 feet distance is essential to see that we don't get the COVID from the person who is positive. Frequent hand washing with soap and water is enough. We don't require special substances. Simple soap and water kills it, and disinfecting the surfaces that we touch very frequently. One among the most common thing is your mobile phone. Keep disinfecting the mobile phone and tabletops or surfaces that we touch. Second thing is, this is very similar to SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV virus, where we knew that 60 to 71% of ethanol or hydrogen peroxide or 1% sodium hypochlorite, which is being used nowadays in hospitals as the disinfecting agent. So benzalkonium chloride and chlorhexidine are not shown to be effective. Surgical face masks may prevent human coronavirus transmission from symptomatic to carriers. Now, there are two types of persons that we come across: people who are well-to-do and people who are in the low socioeconomic group. These are at a more vulnerable situation because the density of population in low socioeconomic zones is very high. They have single room tenements, they have no separate access to special facilities, and money is also a constraint. So the disease behaves slightly differently in those who are well-to-do compared to those who are socioeconomic. Having said that, there is not much of discrimination. It is sarva manava samanatva or sarva samatva for the virus. Then coming to some important definitions, asymptomatic persons, people who do not have symptoms but have tested positive. Pre-symptomatic persons, they have symptoms but the test got positive tested, and then after 2 or 3 days or 1 to 3 days. Symptomatics, of course, you know. Post-symptomatic, those who have recovered the COVID illness. COVID illness is generally divided into 4 types: mild, moderate, severe, and critical. So we will see what is mild and what is moderate and what is severe and what is critical and what we are expected to do. Now, a patient with acute respiratory illness with fever of or at least one of the following signs is to be tested for COVID. So the history of travel and all have gone now. Residents in a location reporting community transmission, something like what we are having in our country now. Contact with a confirmed or a probable SARS case is important. And COVID-19 person in the past 14 days, the symptoms of onset. They must have fever and respiratory illness and must be residing in a community where active transmission is there, or they must have come into contact with a person who is a COVID positive case. And requiring hospitalization, no alternative diagnosis is explainable, then probably think of COVID because it is in the pandemic situation. Now, what is asymptomatic illness? How do we know how many people are asymptomatic? There is a nature's experiment has gone. In this cruise liner, the ship which all of you know, there were 217 persons on the ship. Out of them, 128 were tested positive for COVID. Among those 128, only 81%, 128 out of 217 or 59% are tested positive. Out of those 128, 104 out of them are asymptomatic, which means 81% are asymptomatic. Maybe a little higher estimate, but nonetheless, the epidemiologists feel that there is around 50% of asymptomatic illness in this country, in this situation. So what does that mean? People who have the virus, but they don't have the symptoms. They are asymptomatic illness. If you test them, they will be positive. Is it good or bad? This is one question which you can answer in the chat box. Do you think asymptomatic illness for a disease like this is good or bad? If it is good, one sense, it is bad in other sense. I would incite the listeners to answer them. Another dictum is assume everyone as SARS-CoV positive. Assume everyone whom you come across as SARS-CoV positive. Then only we can prevent transmission of infection, because we don't know who is asymptomatic and who is symptomatic. So unless tested, we will not be knowing. This is the story, nature's experiment about asymptomatic illness. So look at this graph here. The graph is from 0 days to 21 days here. So we started here on the 21 days, and then the peak is around 3 or 4 days, and then drops to around 10 days. It is almost dropping down. So this is the incubation period of the illness. So among the confirmed cases of COVID, they found out that the incubation period is as long at the most around 14 days, but usually around 10 days, the peak occurring around 5.1 to 5.2. So that is the ability of the virus in the initial parts. So asymptomatic illness, pre-symptomatic illness plays a greater part in the transmission of disease. Now, all of you are very familiar. This slide need not be explained too much for all of you, because we do know that cough and sore throat are some of the important symptoms. Shortness of breath and difficulty as the disease progresses, fatigue, muscle weakness and body ache, and congestion or runny nose or loss of taste or smell. This is ageusia and also anosmia are reported here. Headache and other neurological symptoms are also possible, but they are not very common. Nausea, vomiting and diarrhea can also occur. How long the symptoms last? Symptoms will last for about 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon the immunity of the individual. When they appear within 2 to 14 days of the exposure, usually within the first 5 to 7 days, and then they last for about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, this slide is the sources from British Medical Journal, a beautiful way of looking at the symptoms. Look at cough and look at conjunctivitis at the end here, and look at cough. People in the dark blue are the percentage of persons who have cough. Likewise fever, likewise shortness of breath. These are the 3 most common symptoms. Then the other ones keep on becoming less and less, and the red shows that they don't have those symptoms. For example, very few people have conjunctivitis, and majority of them, they do not have conjunctivitis. So this is a list of symptoms that can occur, but in an individual, it might vary the presentation. But most important thing is the cough, fever, shortness of breath, fatigue, and then cough with sputum, that is productive cough. And so you asked me whether could there be hemoptysis. Yes, there could be in a small percentage of people, there could be hemoptysis. Abdominal pain also can occur, wheezing can occur, headache is quite a common symptom. These are the various ways of looking at the symptomatology of the disease. Now, the younger the patient, the ear, nose, throat complaints are more. The elderly the patient, fever, fatigue, loss of appetite and diarrhea are more. And you see here headache, loss of smell, nasal obstruction, asthenia, cough, myalgia, rhinorrhea, taste dysfunction, sore throat. Fever may not be the presenting feature in 50% of the patient. That you remember. So I don't have fever, it may not be COVID, not like that. If we have the other symptoms, we need to immediately think of COVID. Another thing is 17 fatal COVID cases detailed in China's National Health Commission. The median time from the first symptom to death is around 14 days. Okay, that means it gives time for us to really act. Not very few people suddenly go down in their health and die. But then in general, around 6 days time is available. One has to be very careful to select and sort out the patient and trace the moderate and severe cases to the hospital. So the older the patient, 11.5 days, and more than 70 years, they last for 20 days the infectivity. So the younger the patient, they lose it fast. This is again a self-explanatory slide. All of you are aware, the hand washing, the cough etiquette, disposal of the tissues, cleaning of the surfaces, avoiding unnecessary travel. And then contact handshake, community gatherings, touching the nose and other things, isolating to the home, work from home, and mask. Firmly believe that everyone whom we meet can gift us SARS-CoV-2. That might result in COVID disease. Now, what is this virus? This is a rhinoviridae virus is the family, nidovirales is the order, and we have got the coronaviridae is the subfamily in that. We have orthocoronaviridae subfamily in that. There are alpha viruses, there are beta viruses, delta viruses, and gamma viruses. Ours is the beta COVID virus, very similar to SARS-CoV, very similar to MERS-CoV, and this is called SARS-CoV-2 to differentiate it from the SARS virus. What is this HCO 22.9? That is the common cold virus, the coryza virus, human coryza virus. HCO3 is HCOV 229E is the human coryza virus. That's an alpha coronavirus, whereas this is a beta coronavirus. So what does it matter? If it is a beta coronavirus, this is how it looks like. You can see the colorful ones that are projecting out, and these are called the spike proteins or spike glycoproteins. There are the ones which are the receptor-like thing. Here, what are we seeing? These things are the membrane glycoproteins, and there is the caps. There is a viral RNA inside that. This is the viral RNA there. Now, when we do a PCR test, we are going to look at the proteins here, and proteins here. All the types of proteins which are available there, the virus is liquefied, and the test will pick up any type of protein sequence that is there, the amino acid sequence or the genetic sequence there in them is picked up by the RT-PCR. That is why it is highly sensitive as well as specific. 70% of the genetic sequence is similar to SARS-CoV virus. That is why this is called SARS-CoV-2. And then we have got MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV, which are almost similar. Middle East respiratory syndrome, and SARS-CoV originated in the bat. There was a mutation in the spike. One of the spikes of the bat virus has mutated and produced this one. How does this graft onto the cell surface? It uses the receptor ACE2, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 inhibitors. What clinical implication it has got, we will see a little later. There are membrane glycoproteins, there are envelope proteins, they are embedded in the host membrane, and the bilayer and encapsulating helical cyclonucleic capsid comprising of the viral RNA is there. Now, once the AC receptor is receiving the virus, there will be an uncoating there inside. The coat is removed, and then the chain is opened up. It is processed by the mRNA. Multiple copies of that are done, and that is multiplicated in the endoplasmic reticulum, goes to the Golgi in this one, and the assembly and budding occurs. The Golgi apparatus prepare the new virus, and again it circles and the capsule starts. Then exocytosis. All this occurs mainly in the respiratory tract endothelium. Now, what is personal protection? Avoid contagious people, frequently have hand wash, sanitization, disinfection. When we are a patient, what we have to do? Avoid close contact with anyone, stay at home, use mask, and restrict outdoor movement. If this is followed by all asymptomatic positives as well as the pre-symptomatic positives and also the cases, transmission can be arrested. Now, this is a very important slide for all of us to understand. The one that you are seeing, the purple peak, is what would normally happen when there is no intervention for the pandemic. Once the pandemic starts, look here, the dotted line is the healthcare capacity of a country. This varies from country to country, the number of beds, the number of ICUs, number of doctors, number of tests that you can do. All those things you can combine in one measure called the healthcare capability. And we are trying to build up the capacity. That is what building up capacity is, one exercise by the government. When the pandemic starts, it will peak like that and go like that. So in that, what will happen? It will challenge the healthcare at least 3 to 4 times more than what we can handle. Then how do I mitigate the problem? So first, to delay the outbreak, markedly reduce the peak burden on the healthcare and diminish the overall case mortality and healthcare impact. How do I do that? All the measures that we are taking today, like personal protection, hand washing, and then contact closed door staying, and avoiding contact with infected persons, getting tested for all those who are having symptoms, all those measures are the ones which reduce the transmission and case burden. So the epidemic becomes flatter like this. So it will be within the manageable capacity of the healthcare. So the pandemic, we don't want to end the pandemic in 3 months, killing around 50% or 25% of the people without ICU beds or without ventilators or anything. On the other hand, we flatten the pandemic and see that over a period of time, all of us will get the disease and the mortality is reduced, case fatality is reduced, and the healthcare capacity is maintained. This is the effort that all governments are working on. So delay the peak, reduce the peak burden on the healthcare, diminish the overall case fatality, overall case rate, mortality rate, and health impact of the disease. Now, there are 3 types of people that we have. People who are well, avoid becoming infected. How do we do that? We have looked at people who are sick, avoid infecting others and allow for your own recovery. The third one is people who take care of the sick, and they have to protect themselves and other family members from infection. Those who are not infected as yet should avoid becoming infected by avoiding contact with the COVID case or any suspect symptomatic. Second one is avoid infecting others once we are tested positive, either symptomatic or asymptomatic. We should isolate ourselves. And then how do we do that? We will see in the subsequent slide. And of course, those who are taking care of the people, they have to be taken care of. Now, the common symptoms in those who are survivors and those who are non-survivors, same fever, cough, dyspnea are there, and ICU admission also is there. Only difference is invasive ventilation. Invasive ventilation, all those who are non-survivors, most of them, they had to go on to the invasive ventilation. And you see here, in the survivors, sepsis and ARDS have occurred around that date, whereas here sepsis, ARDS, acute cardiac and kidney injury, secondary infection, and death are the various things that have occurred. As I have told you, we are not going to look more into these aspects today, and we will be concentrating on people who are going to survive and those who have got milder and moderate illness. And see what tests we can do: the chest radiograph, CT, white cell count, lymphocyte, platelets, C-reactive protein, D-dimer, LDH, liver enzymes, all these things. Somebody may say that I can only look at lymphocytes and then get along with the treatment. It's not possible. You have to have the battery of tests. Once the patient is moderate and severe, we have to have these tests done. You can easily see from those non-severe disease with the severe disease, you can see around 54% to 76, 84 and 94. And the counts also, the lymphopenia and then the leukopenia is seen in those severe cases. And then platelets are not that much depressed like dengue fever in this particular condition. CRP 56 versus 81, D-dimer 43 versus 59.6, LDH 37 versus 58, and then liver enzymes, you can 18 versus 40, something like that. So these are important tests to differentiate a non-severe disease from a severe disease, apart from the patient's symptoms, oxygen saturation, breathlessness, and all that. So these tests will be mandatory once we admit the patient. All these parameters have to be looked into. We do not know whether the list is sufficient or it is going to expand in the near future, or some of these may be dropped out in the near future. Now, factors potentially, supposing we are doing, what is the test we are doing? We are doing the RNA, we are sequencing the viral RNA using nucleic acid amplification test. It is called NAT, nucleic acid amplification test, simply called the RT-PCR. Just like you do PCR for any other disease, here also there is a specific viral nucleic acid amplification test, RT-PCR. This RT-PCR is a highly sensitive and highly specific test, though it is costlier and it takes 24 hours for the or more to get the result. Sometimes we may have a negative result. Factors potentially leading to a false negative result are poor specimen quality, timing, specimen not handled properly, and vironomics itself. If a negative result is obtained from a patient with a high index of suspicion, particularly when the upper respiratory tract specimens were collected, additional specimens, including lower respiratory tract, should be collected, because upper respiratory specimens may not show positivity in all the cases. Next slide will demonstrate that. So how do I triage the patient? People who have high index of COVID suspicion, non-hospitalized, hospitalized. Non-hospitalized, direct SARS-CoV-2 NAT testing or PCR testing, nasopharyngeal, nasal, mid-turbinate rather than oropharyngeal or saliva. Do not try to depend on oropharyngeal and salivary secretions. Nasal, nasopharyngeal, mid-turbinate are okay, provided collected under or self-collected specimens are acceptable. If negative, repeat the testing in those non-hospitalized. In those who are hospitalized and they have lower respiratory symptoms, again, retesting may be required. Known exposure, high prevalence, again, we require repeat testing if they are negative. If they are positive, there is no need. Then once there is low suspicion, then we have no low suspicion. First test is negative RT-PCR. We may not do a second test in such a situation. Now, real-time PCR test is the gold standard test. For any of the diseases we know, we have a direct test and an indirect test. The direct test measures the virus in terms of their antigenicity. Indirect test measures the antibodies. So antibodies, we'll see about the antibodies. There is a real-time PCR test and the TrueNAT or CBNAT test. Both of them we are trying to look at the viral antigens and then look at the sequencing there in the real-time PCR. So average time they say 4 to 5, but the report in our country takes around 24 hours, and accuracy is very good, and the samples are 90 samples can be done in a single run, whereas here we can only do 1 to 4 samples, and it is the maximum of 48 samples per day. This is much faster. TrueNAT and CBNAT are much faster compared to RT-PCR. Now you will ask me now which test that we have to do. There are two issues that you need to understand. One is the sensitivity and the other is specificity. Sensitivity is the ability of the test to rule out disease. If the test is negative, I can say that there is no COVID in a patient. Specificity is the ability of the disease to confirm the disease. If the test is positive, yes, this is a true positive. This is not a false positive. Sensitivity involves with true negatives and false negatives. False negatives are more when the test is less sensitive, and false positives are more when the test is less specific. I'll give you a very simple example. Look at sputum. Sputum for AFB. Sputum for AFB is a very specific test. But can we swear somebody who is not having sputum positivity, can we say that he is not a case? There are a lot of false negatives in that. So the sensitivity is rather low. But if we find sputum positivity on the microscope, it is confirmatory. There are no false positives in general in that. Likewise, you go for X-ray. X-ray could be a very sensitive tool to screen the patient, but is a poor tool to confirm the disease. Why? If the X-ray is positive, we cannot swear it is tuberculosis. But if the X-ray chest film is negative, confidently we can rule out the disease. So here, a sensitive test rules out the disease. There are not many false negatives here. A specific test confirms the disease. There are not many false positives here. These two tests, the sensitivity is nearing 95-98%. They're highly sensitive and highly specific. So you can see here, the specificity is 100% in all the situations, whereas sensitivity, depending on the respiratory secretion that we have collected, it could be as low as 76 to as high as 100. That is why mid-turbinate secretion is what is really asked for. Now, the current capacity ICMR approved on 1,000 COVID labs are there. 730 are in the public sector, 270 are in the private sector. RT-PCR capability 557, TrueNAT capability 363, and CBNAT 80. These are the figures till yesterday. They may approve more labs also. Now, ICMR has approved around 4 days back the standard Q COVID-19 antigen test. What is this test? This is something like your pregnancy test or hepatitis B test. It is a card test. It is a point of care test where one can directly do the test here in the point of care and then decide whether the patient is positive or it requires treatment. The specificity is very high. The sensitivity is around 80%. So that's a good way to look at it. And this recommendation is there from the ICMR, and this test is available in bigger cities already. It will be available very soon in all the centers also. There are 2 companies which have been listed. One is the company from India, that is the biosensor, SD biosensor. There is also one from the United States also has come out with this test. Several countries are also developing these things. So then we have got this antibody test. Here, it is strictly advised not to do the antibody test for diagnosis. You can click the reference, you'll find out why not. Don't use the antibody test for diagnosis. Our next slide will explain that. These are more for sero surveys. Antibody tests are not useful as a diagnostic tool as of now. At a later stage, we don't know. We may get another test which could be very early positive, high sensitivity and specificity. As of now, any antibody test is only to look at whether the person had the disease, not whether he is having the disease. So ICMR, US FDA have approved IgE ELISA kits for COVID-19 antibodies only for the sero surveys, not for diagnosis, please. You can click the link and read the details. So this is how it looks like the RT-PCR, the point of care test I said. You apply the specimen here. Of course, this is not blood, but is the respiratory secretion collected in a small vial there. They have provided all the materials. If 2 lines are there, it's positive. 1 line is control. And if only test line is positive, it is not. It is inconclusive. This is also inconclusive. This is a negative result. This is a positive result. Just like your hepatitis card or troponin or pregnancy test. The principle is same. Here the swab is put in that nasal cavity and the nasal turbinate is rather swab, and that swab is taken out and put in a liquid medium, and the virus is expressed into the liquid medium in a closed container, and that liquid is applied onto the sort of sample pad here, and we read the reaction in 15 to 30 minutes. It should not be read after 30 minutes, not before 15 minutes. Now, this is called the RAT or rapid antigen test. It is empowering the public. Here, doctor's prescription for this test is not mandatory. Whereas for PCR test, you may require a doctor's prescription. whereas this is ICMR approved test. US FDA also has approved the same point of care test. So what is the way we go about? First, do the rapid antigen test as described in the previous slide. If that is positive, this is reported as true positive and action taken. No further PCR is required. It saves time, saves money, and it immediately starts the treatment. You can start the treatment isolating the patient. Whereas if the test is negative and if the fellow is symptomatic with fever and other things, send the sample for RT-PCR. Because this test is negative, if it is positive, specificity is 100%. So there is no problem here about confirmation of diagnosis. But sensitivity is rather low. If it is negative, we may miss certain, it may be a false negative. In order to confirm that negative result, we do an RT-PCR here. Suppose the patient is not symptomatic, declare as negative, no more testing. If this is the algorithm followed, life becomes much easier. Everyone need not go for the RT-PCR. Today, the methodology is everyone has to report to the fever clinic. The fever clinic people will decide that it is a COVID illness like thing or not. If they decide COVID illness, they are ordering the RT-PCR. In the next 1 week or 10 days, they are going to do the RAT test. And the RAT test is positive, straight away ICMR is informed in the online and it is a positive case and action is taken and then triage is done. Suppose it is negative, is the patient symptomatic, has fever, cough, sore throat or worsening, they do the RT-PCR. If he is asymptomatic, declare him as negative. This is the testing algorithm that we are going to follow. Again, I am emphasizing, don't do the antibody test as far as the diagnosis is concerned. Why? So the blue line here is the SARS-CoV RNA antigen. Either you pick up by your RT-PCR or by the point of care test. Whatever way you do, the blue line is there, and this is where we want most of the people to be picked up, because that is the stage at which they are transmitting the illness. Up to this point, the transmission is maximum, the virus excretion is maximum, and the virus is coming down slowly over a period of time by around 21 to 28 weeks. So why we are asking not to do the antibody test? Two types of antibodies can be generated. One is the IgG antibody, the other is the IgM antibody. The IgG antibody, the titers are rather low, it is non-neutralizing, it is not protective, and this starts at 7 days, ends at 21, peak around 14 days, and after that it is not going to be positive. So by doing this test, we may know that somebody is positive, but this will be positive only after the 7 days. So we will be losing a very precious time. Another thing is these levels are much lower, difficult to detect. Then the sensitivity and specificity of this particular test is much lower compared to this, the specificity of 100, sensitivity of around 90-95%. Here, sensitivity and specificity are rather lower, so you may have a false negative result or a false positive result. You may unnecessarily overtreat, or you may leave a person that he is negative, and these are the pitfalls of this test. So please don't do that. So when we do the IgG test, the IgG start, this is the IgM, this is the IgG is the first one, that is the yellow line, the green line is the IgM, that disappears by 21. The IgG, as you all know, the immediate response is the IgM, and the next response is the IgG. The IgG starts at 14 days and goes on continuing. What does this mean? This means a patient has suffered COVID illness and has mounted a sizable antibody response. Don't ask me whether it is protective or not. We do not as yet know whether the IgG that we mount against the COVID virus is protective against next infection. Studies are going on. We have to wait for a while to see whether the IgG antibodies are really protective. There are two types of antibodies. One is called the non-neutralizing antibodies. The other is called the neutralizing antibodies. Non-neutralizing antibodies are the ones which are not useful. They are just the viral epitope is picked up and they do not extinguish the infecting virus. That means they don't do anything to the virus. Simply they appear as a response in the human body. Whereas neutralizing antibodies are the one which recognize the viral epitopes and then eliminate and greatly diminish the infective virus. This is what we want. Whether our IgG is capable of being a neutralizing antibody, we have to wait and see. It appears that it is a neutralizing antibody. Another reason why we don't want to test the IgM, it is a non-neutralizing antibody. Why we don't do IgM test? Because low sensitivity, low specificity, very small period only it is positive, and then the peak, the levels are also much lower, and then it is a non-neutralizing type of antibody. Whereas IgG appears to be a protective antibody. You can see the IgM, IgD, several classes of IgG, 1, 2, 3 different types of antibodies, their neutralizing potential, their opsonization, sensitization to NK cell killing, and all those things have been done. And one can go to this reference if we want to look at the various details about the viral antibodies. So guidelines for the management here, so there is standard operating protocol. SOP is the standard operating protocol, and this standard operating protocol means they're prepared as a part of the guidelines. They ensure optimal utilization of the available resources and appropriate care for all the COVID patients. And there are 3 levels of COVID centers for our country. The first one is, another thing is COVID mimics. Certain types allergic rhinitis and other viral illnesses might mimic. If you have a lot of sneezing, a lot of runny nose, and then burning eyes, unlikely that it is COVID. And there are always pitfalls in classifying like that. Understand that people who have the allergy, they have more itchy symptoms and runny nose and then the red eyes and conjunctival suffusion, versus people who have COVID, they have more of fever, shortness of breath, and then cough, exhaustion, and things like that. Now, having said that, the COVID can be asymptomatic, as you see the green one. The purple one is the prodromal phase, like fever, cough, sore throat, arthralgia, myalgia, GI symptoms, pneumonia with fever, lethargy, increasing CRP, decreasing the ALC and the X-ray features of pneumonia, or they may become severe, have progressive hypoxia, exertional dyspnea, shortness of breath, and also have the markers in the blood being positive. And this is the pneumonia with hypoxia. And finally, the critically ill patients with multi-organ failure, ARDS, shock, and other things. So these are the various categories: asymptomatic, symptomatic, but no evidence of pneumonia. And third category is the with pneumonia and pneumonia with hypoxia and critical cases. These are the various finer segregations, but nonetheless, there is a lot of overlap in these things. Now, what ICMR is advising now, the Ministry of Health, this is the triage of the positives. So somebody is tested positive on the PCR or on the point of care test, either way, then you have to look whether he is eligible for home isolation, because we don't have enough resources to isolate everybody by the governmental means. So is there a chance for keeping the patient eligible for home isolation? The health team comes and assesses whether they have a separate room, all the facilities, so they can understand, so they can monitor and then manage the patient at home. If the answer is yes, they are confined for HI. HI means home isolation. Healthcare worker or doctor will come and assess preference for home isolation, no comorbidities, age is an important predictor, oxygen saturation good, no dyspnea, and they will be monitored, and such patients are isolated. 2 types of presentations: asymptomatic, mild ILI type of presentation, suitable for home isolation, isolate at home with proper information to the family members. Suppose a person is staying single, there is no one to manage, or there is only one room in the whole house and there is no way he can be isolated separately, then he has to be taken to CCC. Not suitable for home isolation for various reasons, admit them to COVID care center or CCC. Okay. These people are home isolation, they are not eligible, or they have SARI pneumonia. That means they have gone into a next stage from ILI to SARI pneumonia, admit them to DHC. And if they are not eligible for home isolation anymore because they have severe disease, they have to be admitted to DHC. What is DHC? What is DCHC? What is DCC? We will be looking at. The main shift in the last 20 days is home isolation. So we have to see that as far as possible, we keep the milder illness, asymptomatic individuals, milder illness individuals, pre-symptomatic individuals to be at home. and home isolation should be assessed. If that is not feasible, of course, go for the DCC. Somebody who is a case or a suspected case, home isolation or CC, symptomatically mild or very mild, low risk patient, no non-communicable disease, age is less than 60. Then DCHC is symptomatically moderate symptoms are there, pneumonia is appearing and we have evidence of pneumonia, low risk patient yet, then you have to admit them to DHC, and then DCH is the dedicated COVID care hospital. This is dedicated COVID health center, and this is dedicated COVID care hospital where ICU facilities are there, where intubation facilities are there, NIV is there, non-invasive ventilation and all that. Whereas here, only non-invasive ventilation facility is there is no intubation or invasive ventilation facility. Now, COVID care center for asymptomatic mild COVID cases, it is a specialized center, a converted center of any large school or anything. Along with basic facilities, they must have the facilities for monitoring the patient there, for to follow all the prevention and control practice, and then the waste management, sanitization, and here AYUSH doctors are deployed in the CCC. Separate area, they may be earmarked for entry and exit, especially preferable to have individual rooms, at least, not possible, at least 2 per room, and they must be linked to a DCHC and the DCH. And they must have a dedicated ambulance service and a basic life support in the ambulance is available. Then comes the DCHC. Here, moderately symptomatic cases, patients with pneumonia, suspects are admitted, infection prevention control practices. Allopathic doctors only are allowed here. They have beds with oxygen supply, non-invasive ventilation is done here. Separate area may be there, individual rooms may be there. They have to be linked with the DCH, that is the dedicated COVID care hospital, if they worsen to go for invasive ventilation. And again, BLS, basic life support ambulance, should be there along with that. Now, the DCH is the comprehensive COVID care hospital. We know in our area which are the comprehensive dedicated COVID care hospitals. A list is supplied by the government for each area, and these are run by specialists, specialists, intensivists, and then internal medicine specialists. Must follow protection and prevention, infection control and waste management protocols, fully equipped ICU, isolated beds with assured oxygen support, ventilator, and then the uninterrupted power supply. And these are the higher centers. Once the patient becomes better, they are de-escalated to DCHC, or still better, they may be put in the COVID care center itself. So these are the 3 levels of segregation of the patient. So what are the comorbidities which complicate COVID? Often this is asked by every one of us. Do I get it? Do I do my comorbidity? Will it be a real problem? So here, from the studies, we know hypertension, obesity, chronic lung disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, chronic renal disease, immunocompromised person on azathioprine or other immunosuppressive agents, and then HIV patients, and then people who have chronic liver disease. Immunocompromised includes HIV people also. And then the developmental disabilities and neurological. So more or less, the list is hypertension, obesity, diabetes, lung disease, heart disease, cancer. This is the list. Again, increasing age, increasing fatality. Smoking and hemoglobinopathies, fatalities are more. Fatality in the healthy subjects also are being reported. And these are observed as a near associations. We can't say they are causing this. There is no cause-effect relationship, but associations are quite strong. Above all, the reaction of an individual's immune system to the onslaught of the virus is very important in the outcome. O group appears to have better outcomes in terms of literature. Now, we are going to have another 10 minutes to look at the CCC and the DCH and the DCHC. COVID care center, asymptomatic mild, SpO2 more than 94, pulse rate is less than 100, respiratory is less than 24. There are no comorbidities without any other comorbidity. And even if they are there, they are well controlled and well treated. Where this person has to go to CC if he is positive, either asymptomatic positive or a true positive with symptoms. Whereas beds with oxygen facility, DCH, moderate illness, SpO2 is like that, heart rate is increasing, respiratory rate is increasing, there are comorbidities, or pregnant women also there. And dedicated COVID care hospital, severe symptoms, SpO2 is falling under the room air, heart rate is going up, and then the blood pressure is going down, respiratory is going up. They have comorbidities. They have to be triaged to the third level or the DCH. And then having done that, we measure the SpO2 and then the respiratory rate and look for evidence of pneumonia. Here pneumonia may be there, and here pneumonia is severe, and respiratory rate we have already seen. Chest X-ray, we don't require to do a chest X-ray in these patients. If at all we do, there will be grade 1 changes may be there. Here, there will be CT chest and X-ray may show grade 2, grade 3, and then grade 4 changes. What are the laboratory findings? Neutrophil, CRP, ferritin, D-dimer, LDH, interleukin, IFT. These are not generally required in the milder cases. And these are the values if done in the studies. In the moderate cases, there is slight derangement, as you can see here, and there is moderate or severe derangement in all these parameters in case of severe disease. Then, what is the treatment that is followed? Paracetamol, antitussives, vitamin C, zinc, omeprazole. Don't ask me how whether vitamin C works or not, zinc works or not. There is no solid evidence to say that. But if you give them, nothing is harmful. And omeprazole, there are a few studies saying that people who are on omeprazole and then acid suppression, they are going into more severe disease. One has to be careful in giving omeprazole. If necessary, only use it. Here, when you come to same treatment here, adequate hydration is very important. Only thing is here, the hydroxychloroquine is a much debated subject, and this is not routinely prescribed. Do not use hydroxychloroquine routinely, and particularly people at high risk, we can use particularly if the QT interval is more than 0.0480 milliseconds, we should not give. Because this is known to produce cardiac problems with prolongation of QT interval, and ECG is a mandatory thing before we start on HCQS. HCQS is not the drug that is recommended in the other countries, but Indian government in the latest guidelines too, they are sticking to HCQS in some patients who have these comorbidities, who have high risk patients, and not to everyone. But here in this case, it is being used to all the patients because they already have the severe disease. Here, of course, HCQ has got no role. Antibiotics, again, debatable because routine starting of antibiotics is not mandatory unless there is evidence of bacterial infection in any one of the either this stage. And this stage, of course, you have to see whether the patient really requires antibiotic. This stage, usually there is sepsis and we may require to give antibiotics. Anticoagulation, this is one very important intervention that we have to give to all patients in moderate and severe disease. What do we give? Enoxaparin. This is to heparinize to prevent the disseminated intravascular coagulation. So always look for the platelet count, and dalteparin also can be used, or unfractionated heparin also can be used. This is not indicated in milder disease, whereas this has to be used in severe disease. If at all any interventions are proved very worthy, this is 1 and this is 2. These two are very mandatory. Dexamethasone to reduce the inflammatory cytokines and act as an anti-inflammatory is highly useful. The dosage is listed here. 6 milligrams IV OD for 5 days, or methylprednisolone also can be given, only injectable, not oral. Here also it is given, but the dose is slightly higher and duration is also slightly higher. So as far as the interventions are concerned, apart from paracetamol, antitussives and some routine vitamins, omeprazole, be cautious. HCQS only in people who have comorbidities in high risk and not in case of severe disease. Antibiotics, not as a routine. Anticoagulation, a must for moderate and severe disease, not in milder disease. Steroids, must in moderate and severe disease, not in milder disease. And then oxygen support, not required here, must be given here. How much we give, what is the target that we need to achieve, nasal prong or face mask or high flow nasal catheter or a CPAP or whatever are the devices. First non-invasive ventilation, then when we come here, there will be invasive ventilation. And this is a very important, studies have proved people who have been put in the prone position, either when they are on non-invasive or on the invasive ventilation, they did much better, because all of us know the prone position, the lung expansion is maximum. Out of all the positions, lying down in flat is the worst position for the lungs. Lying laterally on one side or left or right side is good. Sitting and standing are okay. Prone position, the lung expansion is maximum, and that is done. Much is talked about cytokine storm. This is also called the overflow of the overdoing of the inflammatory molecules. And tocilizumab is approved in the milder cases. And we have now yesterday, ICMR has approved another drug from the Biocon, which is also a drug being used in psoriasis, which is also a cytokine storm reducing agent, found to be very effective. Probably that drug appears to be very promising in terms of the this one. So the management, as far as the other international guidelines, almost similar from WHO and NIH, and they have not considered the HCQ at all in their guidelines, whereas Indian guidelines are still recommending some HCQ. Empirical antibiotic administration also they are not suggesting unless there is evidence. In our country, we tend to prescribe something or other. As physicians, we know we try to treat it, sometimes over-treat it with HCQ or antibiotics. We have to be careful, and managing the D-dimer and CRP and ferritin is important, because once you look at them or the CT and X-ray evidence, then we will be able to include in the initial evaluation, we'll be able to treat moderate disease and severe disease much more easily. So what are the abnormalities under this CT? Peripheral distribution, ground glass opacities, reticular opacities, vascular thickening, peripheral distribution opacities, pleural effusion, lymphadenopathy are rather rare. So the commonest things are, these are the CT opacities. And whom do I do a CT? Not for grade 1 disease or milder disease. For those who have evidence of worsening pneumonia or those who are on the severe disease, then we do the CT abnormality. Complications of COVID, what are the things that can occur? This will be the second level presentation later on. We can say selected topics can be taken as the second level presentation, like COVID pneumonia worsening, cytokine storm, interleukin-1, 6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, acute respiratory distress syndrome, type 1 respiratory failure, how it is managed with the NIV, positive pressure NIV, and non-invasive positive pressure ventilation, and also the sort of invasive ventilation, and disseminated intravascular coagulation, sepsis and shock, cardiac, renal, and hepatic multi-organ failure. These probably we will have to look at in a separate meeting in a detailed way. Suffice to know that there are 2 or 3 interventions which are very good. And again, going back to those things, most important thing is anticoagulation, steroid administration, prone position, and looking for the cytokine storm, and probably using tocilizumab. What is the role of antiviral agents? We have not talked of. So what is the age-specific mortality? As age advances, we said the mortality is higher. Anyway, people around 80, the mortality is going to be higher in them. And having said that, the mortality goes up and up as age increases after 49. So you can see the effect of age on the mortality. Now, medical management of severe COVID, we have now discussed those things. And then we will come to the critically COVID. These people are the ones who have the septic shock and multi-organ failure, venous thromboembolism, and catheter-related infections, ventilator-associated pneumonias, and sometimes barotrauma because of the inflation of the lungs by the ventilation and all that. Norepinephrine is the drug of choice for the hypotension. Now, when do I send back the patient home? When 3 days of symptom, after 3 days after resolution of fever without antibiotic, or there is improvement in the symptoms, and or 10 days from the onset of symptoms. So whichever is the later, then we have to do test-based strategy, use resolution of symptoms, improvement in respiratory symptoms, and negative molecular assays, 2 or more. And then, but in our country, we are not testing to discharge. We are mostly using this methodology to send them home after recovery. So special intervention, there is a concern, can we use the antihypertensive AC and ARB drugs? Now, there is no conclusive evidence to say to stop or modify, so we can continue to use them. hydroxychloroquine, no international approval, mild and moderate cases, Indian government, in selected cases it is suggesting. All antiviral drugs are under trial. There is no one antiviral agent which is conclusively useful. Remdesivir in severe cases, in limited experience, is found useful, and tocilizumab off-label, originally used for rheumatoid arthritis. It is a sort of these are being tried in COVID. Tocilizumab very useful, and any drug that is used without evidence is called EUA, which is emergency use authorization. Any new treatment, if it is showing promise without randomized trials, there will be EUA will be given. There is an emergency use authorization. With that, one can treat the patients with information and consent from the patient. A lot is talked about convalescent plasma. It appears promising, but didn't give the desired results. Next time when we have the second lecture, we will include convalescent plasma also in the talk. So what are the antivirals tried? These are the various, this is very extensively tried, and this is an immunomodulator. Interferon also has been tried. Lopinavir is tried. Oseltamivir, the H1N1 drug, also is tried. Remdesivir is the most promising among all the drugs, among the antivirals, particularly in the severe pneumonia. Interleukin-1 inhibitors like anakinra, which is used in rheumatoid arthritis, interleukin-6 inhibitor like tocilizumab, and other intravenous immunoglobulins and JAK inhibitors are also being tried. And the latest drug that is approved, which is being used in psoriasis, which is an immunomodulator from the Biocon laboratory of Bangalore, appears highly promising, but we have to wait and see how it fares in clinical situations. Now, you can see here when fever myalgia is there, antivirals, maybe convalescent plasma here may be immunomodulators, acute respiratory distress syndrome here, ventilation, and other adjuncts and recovery. So the phase of the disease more or less determines what sort of interventions we use. Now the landscape as far as vaccines is concerned, 21 candidate vaccines are in different phases of clinical trials, 78 candidate vaccines under pre-clinical trials, total 140 vaccines are under different stages of development, no approved vaccine as such. Having said that, there is what is called the Bharat Biotech Covaxin. Has been approved by ICMR for a study in 12 institutions, and this Zydus J-COVID-D also is approved. Both are being tried, and maybe in another 6 to 8 weeks time we may have the trial results. There are 7 vaccine trials undergoing in India. Apart from that, we can see in your WhatsApp messages, several vaccine trials are also being done. As of now, these two appear promising and are being tried. It will take around 6 to 9 months. How much? 6 to 9 months to come to public use after these trials are over. Don't think that once the trials are over, we can straight away start injecting these people, because we have to do a large scale trials, and safety and then efficacy has to be demonstrated. But nonetheless, there is a strong hope, provided the virus does not mutate. This is a big if. So, okay, this thing, I give you the references here. This is a 223-page manual on COVID alone, coronavirus disease 2019, and published very recently, somewhere in May. And this is a thing which is published in July by 70 pages by the Medscape e-medicine. And this is the WHO publication. These 3 books I am sharing with you for your information. If you read, it will give you a comprehensive update on what we have talked about. And then how to cope with this. 1, indoor playing, relaxation exercises, yoga, meditation, aerobic exercises, of course prayer. Whatever faith we are, there is a superpower that is guiding our faith, and don't forget prayer to be included in your routine. Creative activities, positive thinking, and then installation of hope in patients and contacts, reading what we have to catch up, all that reading, listening to music, online learning courses like this. All these will help us to cope with COVID. A big thank you for all those people who have helped to come on to you all, and then do it, the micro laboratories in particular, and the IMA Tiruvallur, my parent branch. I am indebted to them for asking me to come and talk to you. With this, it is around 1 hour 15 minutes or 1 hour 10 minutes we have taken, and we can now discuss the topic depending on your interest. You can type the questions. I stop sharing my presentation hereafter.
Are you hearing, sir? Hello?
I can hear you, sir.
Hear you, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for your excellent talk on the COVID-19. You are bringing us to the in-depth from top to bottom and cleared. We think so. We hope so. Everybody will have a detailed knowledge about the COVID infection and the current status. That is very important. Illustrated very clearly. Yes, sir. We are very thankful to you for sparing the time for us and our people. Still the practicing practitioners, and we will hope you will carry on the next topic in the forthcoming time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. There are a few questions here in the question box.
Yes, sir.
We have to perform Radham in family. Is it advisable to bring 2 priests and conduct it at home in the out of clinical context? I defer to answer that. Effectiveness of MMR vaccine not proved. Either MMR, COVID, your temperature, humidity, all theories have gone. They have been wasted. Dr. Kanyapan asked, does this COVID-19 virus affect beta cells of pancreas? Well controlled, no. They don't. There is no cause-effect relationship of diabetes causing COVID or COVID causing or increasing the diabetes. But then association is found because worst outcomes of diabetes is always a worst outcome because whenever you have diabetes, the immune system itself is challenged. So the ability to cope with the disease is lower. Not that diabetes per se is causative, but it is a contributory cause. What is the role of diuretics? Diuretics, yes, if the patient has got respiratory failure and also has, right heart failure, and he develops cor pulmonale, diuretics can be used not as a routine. We can't purge excrete the virus in the urine by giving diuretic. Diuretics have got no direct role unless the patient is really wet. HCQ for prophylaxis in healthcare workers. Lot is written about the HCQ prophylaxis. It is advocated by Indian government in people who are known to be contacts of a positive case. Supposing there is a case in my family or in my community, you can take 400 milligrams of HCQs on the first day and 200 milligrams daily for the next 5 days. Any drug interactions with TB drugs, can we wait for the ATT to start after 2 weeks of COVID? There are no drug interactions as such evident, but then waiting to start ATT might endanger the life of the patient. We would start the ATT straight away and also manage the COVID along with that. Dr. Lakshmi Murali, thank you, Amma, for being here and asking that question. So these are the questions I have in the question box. Anybody, some more questions are being typed, I guess. So let me see whether those questions are there.
They sent it in the chat box.
Guidelines for practitioner, the best thing is I am going to share you 7 or 8 references right now. Just read the eMedicine article. And there are first 10 pages is essential for guidelines. I'm going to straight away share that in the IMA group as well as in the CME Dr. Sharma group. And you please share it with the other persons whoever want. Anything else? Guidelines for practitioners and the PPE really works. Dr. Manik asks whether PPE really works. It appears that it works because we have several doctors who have been using it in our country across different institutions, and they have been protected. There are isolated cases where PPE is used, but then we are not able to get the required protection and they get COVID and get admitted. There could be a slip somewhere. That is the reason they could not. Ideally, PPE should work, and we have to use don the PPE. Advise doctors in consultation room regarding use of PPE. PPE, what do you mean by PPE? Here is not the full thing may be there. The hood is required, and then the mask, of course, is required. Gloves are required. Keeping distance of 6 feet or 8 feet is required. And then wearing the full gown will help. Or you can change the dress that you are using in the consulting room every day and don't carry the same dress home. You bring another set of dress, leave it here. change or wash and then put on the new dress.
Sir, in Chockalingam cardiologist, can I come in?
Please open up this video. Hello.
Ask him to be brief.
Sir, some of the questions have come in the chat box.
Yeah, I will see the chat box.
Kishore Kumar has asked 6 or 5 questions.
Then we will give it to Dr. Chockalingam. Let me first look at the chat box first. I am looking at the chat box.
Yeah, asymptomatic, are they infectious?
Can you just tell me the name of the person? Welcome.
Kishore Kumar, sir. Kishore Kumar, pediatrician, has asked.
Dear, post questions answers.
Asymptomatic, are they infectious?
Asymptomatic, are they yes. Asymptomatic illness is very much infectious. Asymptomatic illness is infectious. That is the reason we need to find out asymptomatic illness. They're very much infectious.
If it is not aerosol, then ICU doctors, despite the people are getting infected.
Does previous coronavirus infection play a role in the current COVID-19 manifestations? Previous SARS-CoV-2, nobody would have got it. This is a recent infection. Previous other coronavirus infections has got nothing to do with this because the surface antigenicity has completely mutated and changed. Whether this is going to help us or then protect us from future COVID things, it all depends upon whether your IgG antibody that you mount is neutralizing or non-neutralizing. It appears that it is protective. What is the reason for happy hypoxia syndrome? So this is patient will be, does not have the clinical manifestation severe, but then they have the hypoxia because this happens very much in the carpulmonale or the COPD group of people, and their ability to tolerate hypoxia is better, and they are going to have hypoxia and they have to be treated as moderate and severe cases. Does it mean every respiratory center are involved in the disease process? What is that? Does it mean every respiratory center? But I didn't get that question. Every respiratory centers are involved in the disease process.
Does PPE really works?
Is it some kind of autoimmune disorder or vasculitis behind? It is not autoimmune. It is not autoimmune. Body is not mounting any autoantibodies to this one. It is a generalized vasculitis, probably you can say. The pathophysiology is mainly the virus is overwhelming the immune system. What it is trying to do is body is trying to mount a more higher immune system than what is required. That is what is called the cytokine storm. The second one is virus is producing fluid exudation into the alveoli and the ARDS, and that is part of the vasculitis. The cause of fluid accumulation and ARDS is vasculitis, but not generalized vasculitis with rash, bleeding and all that. It is the respiratory vasculitis, more or less, a confined localized vasculitis. And of course, in the end, it is multi-organ failure. Good morning, Dr. Manjunathan. Welcome. Take some time to get the results. And if you suspect COVID, any blood test or there is no blood test as of now. All blood tests are antibody-based. We don't have to do any blood test because antibody-based tests are not advocated either by the Indian authorities or by the international authorities for the reasons which I have already said. EPE we have answered. Is asthma? Yes, asthma, COPD are notorious to increase the risk. LFT must be before starting HS. HQS can derange the LFT. LFT are also required. ECG is a must. LFT also are important. Thanks for excellent session. 6 to 7 stool samples for 2 months almost. Is it acceptable or any other condition? Usually 2 months diarrhea, 6 to 7 stools. Post-COVID, it is has to be evaluated why they are going for such a long period of diarrhea or loose stools. We can't. Indomethacin, no. All NSAIDs are forbidden because NSAIDs block your immune response. We don't want NSAIDs to be given. So only paracetamol that has to be given. If at all we have to use an anti-inflammatory, we have to use dexamethasone and not non-steroidal drugs. What about reinfection rate, severity and prognosis? We have to wait and see for that. As of now, reinfections are occurring. That at least a few cases have been reported. Those are second attack of COVID. We have to wait and see. Left no disagreement with spouse. Okay, that is very important on the sidelines. Excellent talk. Very good. Very good presentation. Thank you. Congratulations, Sharma ji. Very good. And then I am proud.
Dr. RVS has come, sir. RVS, Surendran, sir.
What is the role of antigen and IgM, IgG test kits available in the? I have very clearly told ICMR, US FDA, and any other international agency just vehemently tells you not to use IgM or IgG for testing positivity of COVID for 3 reasons. 1, IgM mounting is very short-lived and goes away, and the period is only 14 days. 2, the height is not good enough to detect. 3, there are a lot of false positives and false negatives. 4, it will not tell me whether the patient is infectious or not. For that reason, we will not do the IgM test. IgM test is useful to see whether the patient has seroconverted and become a positive, seroconversion positive means become immune or not. We have to wait and see whether the IgG is protective, neutralizing antibody or not. We have to wait and see. Please do not do any antibody test. Only antigen test, either RT-PCR or the TB-NAT type of test, or they use the rapid test, which is going to come into your hand very soon. The rapid test, the point of care test. Patient RA and HUKS continue. Patient RA and HUKS, keep monitoring the liver functions, keep monitoring the ECG. If there is no other indication to stop, they can continue. Majority of my patients who are on RA, they are continuing. I have a COVID positive mild case. Members of the family, we have already discussed that. 400 milligrams first day, 500 and 200 milligrams for 4 more days. Patient has to be home isolated. Definitely, that is very right. Always bank on home isolation as far as possible, because we don't have enough facilities in the government sector to isolate all our positive patients. And if we have a 2-room house, it is good enough. All others can stay in 1 room. The COVID patient can be carefully isolated in the other room. I will give you a list of all the things that you need to keep in the isolation room of the patient. What are all the checklist of things wherein you can create now itself 1 room for isolation in your house. In case somebody tests positive, which room you would allot and what are the things you try to keep there. I will give you a list so that you can use them as a checklist, which we are already supplying to our patients and who are asking the question. Will exposure to low viral loads continuously prevent? Yeah, this is what is called the herd immunity theory. So if 30% of the population becomes infected, then probably we will have what is called the low viral load in the community and then prevention of infection. But we should not try and get 30% of Indians, which is around 40 crores, to become infected and wait for that herd immunity to come. Anyway, if that situation comes, it will be there. Ultimately, 30% of the Indian community will be infected at one point or the other, and that will give an immunity for the rest of the people. We have looked at the 3 models. Is there any increased risk for people with ART on HIV patients and good CD4? No. ART, anti-TB drugs, they have to be continued, and the protocol of your treatment is the guiding factor. Of course, if he is critically ill, then he is severe COVID, then you need to probably withhold them for a few days until he comes back. Excellent talk. Thank you, sir. Why avoid omeprazole? Yeah, omeprazole is in few papers recently. WHO has also looked at that. Omeprazole reduces the acid secretion in the stomach, as all of you know. The PPS suppress the acid. When the acid is suppressed, the ability of you to neutralize the ingested virus comes down. So the virus from the acid from the stomach secretions can regurgitate and produce respiratory infection. Can we do PFT regularly in the clinic? You can do the PFT if the patient is COVID negative. If you want to do PFT, please do a COVID test. The COVID test is negative, only you do PFT. Otherwise, you will be generating aerosol. Doing PFT, bronchoscopy, bronchial lavage, endoscopies, and all that to generate aerosols. When you generate aerosol, the infectivity goes much higher, and it will be no more a droplet, it will be aerosol. I think I have answered most of the questions there in the if there are any questions, please post them in the question box or the chat box.
And Sharma,
Yeah.
You can come on video, sir. You can on video.
your talk was so nice, excellent. and very, very scientific, Sharma. I really appreciate for the excellent talk. We have clarified all the doubts. Only one comment I would like to make, Mr. Kumaran. Number of persons are dying because of fear of COVID itself, they are dying. So they must create lot of confidence in individuals, and you have covered so nicely every point. And in question of time, the COVID will go off. Don't get worried about it. Every media showing the tone, it create lot of stress in the mind of any person saying, but they all must take all precautions, because now today life is the most precious thing in the earth. That corona now redefined the life of everyone. Don't bother how you were yesterday. We are all now alive and taking part in this webinar itself is a greatest thing happening now. From today on, how we must lead our life is most important. I really appreciate Sharma for your excellent talk. I really appreciate Kumaran. You have made an excellent one in webinar.
Thank
And
you.
my friends,
Thank you.
We will have a separate talk on stress management during COVID, sir.
I will. Well, we'll talk and then fix up. And how you are interested for the society, for our people, I really appreciate. என்னுடைய நமஸ்காரம் அனைவருக்கும். So nice, excellent one.
Now, one important thing I would like to tell you once again is we keep getting a lot of messages in the WhatsApp and various other media. Please do not show any importance to them unless they are scientific. Please go and verify with the international authorities whether what you read is right or wrong. Simply don't forward.
And also really thankful to Dr. Sharma, an excellent presentation, and he has cleared many of our cobwebs in the understanding of the COVID-19. But as we understand, as on date, we don't have a magic bullet to shoot the COVID as on date, and we don't have a vaccine also right on date. Maybe it may take 6 months to 9 months. And Covaxin and the Cadila is on the anvil, it seems. But until then, we have to cope up with living with COVID. And as you have suggested, if you strictly follow the protocol you have presented now, the mortality, case fatality rate can be reduced. And as our cardiologist, Dr. Shokalingam, has said, we need not be much fearful about COVID, because the fear is coming down nowadays. Mostly persons with comorbidity alone are the many victims. That too can be reduced with the usage of our new armamentarium like tocilizumab and itolizumab as on date in Bangalore, which is available. And thank you, Dr. Kumaran, once more for an excellent illustration which made our understanding better.
Infecting agent is called novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. This is not the SARS-CoV virus of 2013 or 2018. This is called SARS-CoV-2. This is the virus, just like the HIV virus and AIDS disease, just like Treponema pallidum and syphilis. The disease name is called COVID-19. You cannot call it as COVID virus loosely. Technically, we have to call it as SARS-CoV-2 virus. This nomenclature is given by an international committee on taxonomy of viruses. As you can see, no direct connection with the SARS epidemic in the previous stage, but the name holds as SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus, just like HIV. The disease name, there it is AIDS, here it is COVID-19. There it is Treponema pallidum, syphilis, spirella minus, rat bite fever, SARS-CoV-2 by name of the infective agent, and the disease is COVID-19. Because it started in the year COVID-19, they have given the name as COVID-19. As a clinician, remember as COVID-19. For the virus concerned, as far as virus is concerned, SARS-CoV-2 is the virus, that is the internationally accepted nomenclature. This has got no direct connection except the resemblance with the MERS and the SARS virus to around 70% of its extent. That's all is the answer for whatever you have.